Ishan Verma was born in a narrow lane of an old city where homes were built close and dreams were built slowly. His mother, Kalyani Verma, was a school teacher who earned little but gave love in great amounts. She had soft hands, big dreams for her only child, and a voice that calmed storms. Ishan's father, Deepak, was a carpenter who built doors for others but never opened one for his own future. He was a good man, but weak in heart and mind. Life was not perfect, but it was peaceful. Until the day Kalyani got sick. It started with weakness, then coughing, then blood. The doctors said it was a disease they could not treat without money. Ishan was just 9 years old, too young to understand death, but old enough to feel it coming. One evening, she held his little hand and said, "Ishan, promise me. Promise me you'll never stop building. Build your life, build your future, build it all, even if the world breaks around you." He nodded, thinking his mother would be okay tomorrow. But she didn't wake up the next morning. The home that was once warm turned cold. His father sat silent for days. Ishan cried into his mother's old sari, which still carried her scent. And then suddenly, everything changed. Just 6 months after Kalyani's death, Deepak married again. Her name was Meenakshi. She wore too much lipstick and smiled too wide. Ishan was too young to read faces, but it didn't take long to see her true self. Meenakshi did not want a stepson. She made it clear. She gave Ishan burnt food, forced him to do chores while her own children, 2 from a previous marriage, watched cartoons. Ishan's clothes were never washed, and his books were thrown out. When he complained, she slapped him. "This is not your house," she said. "Your mother is dead. No one cares about you." Deepak said nothing. Maybe he was scared, maybe tired, maybe just weak. Whatever it was, Ishan knew that no help was coming. But he did not break. He stopped asking for food and started finding work. At 12, he cleaned a furniture shop after school. He loved the smell of wood, the feel of it, how a rough block could turn into something beautiful. The owner, Mr. Usman, noticed the boy's interest and started teaching him small things: how to use sandpaper, how to carve, how to polish. Ishan never missed a day, never asked for pay, only asked to learn. Usman once said, "You have carpenter blood in you, boy. Use your hands, build your life." At 16, Ishan left home. One night, after another beating from Meenakshi for touching the fridge, he packed his mother's photo and 2 shirts and walked out. He took a train to Pune and arrived with 1,400s in his pocket. He slept on a bus stand for a week. During the day, he searched for work. Finally, a small workshop agreed to take him as a helper. It was a dusty shed that made wooden stools and shelves. Ishan swept the floors, carried wood, and ate leftovers. But he observed everything: the tools, the techniques, the designs. At night, he practiced on scrap wood when no one watched. By 19, he knew enough to build things on his own. With 12,000 saved from years of hard work, he rented a tiny room and began making small furniture pieces: wooden key holders, tea tables, stools. He painted them by hand and sold them on the roadside. Customers loved his designs. He didn't make normal furniture. He made art. Every table had patterns. Every chair told a story. He started gaining attention. One lady, an interior designer named Mrs. Raina, saw his work and gave him his first big order: to design a custom dining set for a high-end client. Ishan worked day and night on it. He carved designs inspired by nature, leaves, flowers, rivers. When the client saw it, she cried. "This is not furniture," she said. "This is poetry." Orders began coming in. Ishan created a name: Verma Woods. He made a simple logo and stuck it on every piece. People started recognizing his brand. He didn't open a showroom. He worked from a rented garage, filled with sawdust and sunlight. He lived in the back room, cooking his meals on a single gas stove. At 21, he met a girl named Isha. She had come to pick up a custom coffee table for her boutique. She was smart, curious, and wore handloom saris. They talked, then met again, and again. Ishan told her about his mother, his past, his dreams. She listened, then smiled and said, "You're not a carpenter, you're a builder of hearts." They fell in love. For 5 years, she stood by him. She helped him build an online presence. She posted photos of his work, wrote stories behind each piece, connected him with more clients. Together, they made Verma Woods into something bigger. By age 26, Ishan had a team of 10 workers. He rented a bigger workshop. He paid good wages and treated everyone with respect. Most of his workers were people like him, orphans, runaways, boys who had been beaten by life. He gave them purpose. He and Isha talked about marriage, about building a life together. Everything was perfect, or so it seemed. Then came the fall. A giant order came from a luxury hotel chain, 200 designer chairs, 40 beds, 25 carved panels. It was the biggest deal of his life. He borrowed money, bought new machines, hired extra workers, but the payment was delayed. Then, the hotel canceled the order, saying their expansion had been paused. The contract had a loophole. Ishan was left with massive losses. He couldn't pay rent. He sold his machines to pay his team. He shut down the new workshop. One by one, workers left. Even the small orders stopped coming. Isha tried to help, but stress broke their bond. She began talking less, staying away more. One night, she said, "Ishan, I can't keep doing this. My parents are angry. They think I wasted my life waiting." "But we built everything together," he said. "I know," she replied. "But sometimes, love is not enough." And she walked away. Ishan sat in darkness that night. Everything he had built was gone. Again. His business, his love, his future. He thought of ending it. But then he found his mother's photo in his drawer, dusty and torn. He cleaned it and looked at her face. "You told me to build," he whispered. "I broke, but I'm still breathing." He stood up. The next morning, he walked to a government-run shelter for homeless men. He volunteered to fix their broken furniture. Well, the staff were shocked. "Why are you doing this for free?" they asked. "I need to keep my hands moving," he said. People noticed. A journalist who visited the shelter wrote about him, the carpenter who refused to quit. The story went viral. Messages poured in. Offers came. Small projects, requests, interviews. One man, a venture capitalist, called him. "Ishan, I want to help you restart Verma Woods. You have talent. You just need a second chance." That call changed everything. Ishan restarted with a small team again. But this time, he didn't just make furniture. He taught. He created a workshop school called The Hands That Build. He trained boys and girls from slums to become artisans. His designs were featured in magazines. Clients flew in from other cities. Verma Woods became a premium handcrafted brand. No machines, just pure work. Ishan became a symbol of revival. But he stayed simple. Still lived in a rented flat, still ate dal roti, still visited the old tea stall where he once sat with his sketchbook. What began again as a one-man workshop had grown into a space filled with life, music, and the soft sound of chisels shaping destiny. The new version of Verma Woods wasn't about just selling products anymore. It was about passing on a skill, a purpose. Ishan had learned that true success was not in the money, but in the difference one could make in other people's lives. His workshop school, The Hands That Build, trained young people from poor communities, orphans, and those left behind by society. Each one of them came with pain. Ishan taught them to carve that pain into wood and turn it into something beautiful. He didn't just teach furniture making. He taught patience, self-respect, and the art of starting again. One of his students, Avni, had once been a street beggar. She had hands used to carrying bowls, but not tools. Now, she was designing full dining sets, and her work was being sold to boutique hotels. Another student, Ravi, had come from a juvenile correction center. He was angry, broken, and silent. Ishan taught him how to express himself through detailed carvings, and over time, Ravi became known for storytelling through furniture. Meanwhile, Verma Woods was gaining recognition nationally. Ishan's handcrafted designs, rooted in Indian tradition but modern in their spirit, were being exhibited at design fairs. Architecture and lifestyle magazines featured his story, From Dust to Dreams, the carpenter who rebuilt his life. Still, Ishan never became arrogant. He arrived at the workshop every day before everyone else, cleaned the tools, and lit an incense stick near his mother's photo that hung in the office. He still remembered her words. He still heard her voice in moments of silence. But success was not a straight road. It came with newer challenges. As Verma Woods grew, a foreign company approached him. They wanted to mass-produce his designs and offered him a deal that would make him a millionaire overnight. "You just give us the patterns and ideas," the CEO had said. "We will take care of production. We will even use your brand name." The offer was tempting. Ishan would be able to build factories, hire thousands, and expand globally. But when he walked into his workshop that evening and saw young Avni working on a hand-carved bench, he realized something. If he gave up his methods, the soul of his work would be lost. He declined the offer. People called him foolish. "You could have been rich," they said. "I already am," he replied, smiling. "I just don't count it in crores." He focused instead on going deeper, not wider. He began creating legacy pieces, furniture that took months to finish. Every piece had a story, a meaning, and a signature. He made fewer items but gave them more life. Then one day, something unexpected happened. Isha, the girl who once walked out of his life, came back. She visited his cafe-style workshop with a client. Her eyes widened when she saw the space, the people, the growth. Ishan was standing by a window, helping a boy with measurements. He turned and their eyes met after years. "Hi," she said softly. "Hello," he replied, calm. "You've built something beautiful," she whispered, looking around. "Thanks," he said with a polite smile. There was silence between them. Then she said, "I was wrong. I left because I was afraid. But you turned pain into art." "Isha," he said gently, "sometimes leaving teaches us who we are. It broke me for a while, but then it built me better." They spoke for a few minutes more. She didn't ask to come back. He didn't ask her to stay. That chapter was closed. Respect remained, but love had moved on. Later that year, Ishan received the National Artisan Award from the Ministry of Culture. The award wasn't just for his craft, but for preserving Indian artistry and empowering marginalized communities. He stood on stage wearing simple clothes and said, "My tools are old, my fingers are rough, and my journey was painful. But when you refuse to quit, the world finds a seat for you." More attention came. Big design studios wanted collaborations. Universities invited him to speak. Even foreign interns came to learn at the Hands That Build. But amidst all this glory, Ishan kept his heart grounded. He started a new initiative, Wood for Warmth. It provided simple furniture for orphanages and old age homes for free, made by his students as practice pieces. Each item carried a hand-signed note, made with care by someone who once had nothing. The stories of these items touched hearts. People cried when they sat on a bench made by a boy who used to sleep on one. A blind girl built a bookshelf by touch. A widowed mother carved a cradle for newborns in shelter homes. But then, one evening, as Ishan was sketching under the dim light of a hanging bulb, he felt a sharp pain in his chest. He ignored it, thinking it was just stress. But it returned. Stronger, sharper, colder. He collapsed. Doctors said it was a minor heart attack caused by exhaustion. "You work too hard," they said. "You don't sleep. You carry too much weight, not just in your work, but in your heart." During his recovery, Ishan had time to think. For the first time in years, he wasn't holding a tool. He missed the feel of wood, the smell of polish, the sound of creation. But he also realized he had forgotten to live outside his dream. After recovery, he made some changes. He reduced his workload. He promoted Ravi, his former student, as the lead designer. He gave more responsibility to his team. He started traveling, seeing other cultures, learning more. And then, one day, he met someone. Her name was Shruti. She was a potter, calm and wise, with mud-stained hands and soulful eyes. They met at an art event in Jaipur. She had heard of him. He was fascinated by her silent strength. They talked about craft, pain, and healing. She didn't care about his fame. He didn't need to explain his past. They fell in love like grown-ups, slowly, silently, deeply. They got married in a small ceremony with just 12 people, his team, her students, and a few close friends. There were no flowers, no music, just the smell of wet clay and fresh wood. Together, they started a combined studio, Earth and Timber. It became a place where wood met clay, where stories became shape. They built furniture with ceramic inlays, pottery stands with wood carvings, and even lamps that combined both arts. But more than the business, it was the peace that mattered. Ishan had finally found someone who didn't try to complete him, but walked beside him, gently and without judgment. Years later, when Ishan was invited to speak at an international design summit in Italy, he stood before thousands and shared his story. Not as a businessman, but as a man who never gave up. "I had no shoes, no food, and no love," he said. "But I had two things, my mother's last words and my two hands. That was enough." When asked how he wanted to be remembered, he smiled and said, "As the boy who built furniture, but more importantly, who built people." Today, Verma Woods is not just a business, it is a movement. It stands for resilience, second chances, and quiet courage. People come from around the world not just to buy his designs, but to feel the spirit behind them. And Ishan? He still wakes up early, drinks tea with Shruti, walks barefoot in the workshop garden, and teaches one student every week. Because, as he always says, if you know how to build with broken pieces, nothing can destroy you. Part 2, complete. Hills of Uttarakhand, where clouds often touched rooftops and silence lived longer than words. She wasn't always mute. In fact, as a little girl, her laugh used to echo across the meadows, chasing butterflies and the sound of bells tied around goats. Her parents, Madhu and Rajiv Sen, were poor but decent people. Madhu worked in the fields and Rajiv was once a woodcutter, but after an accident left his leg partially damaged, he spent most of his days sitting on the veranda, growing angrier with each year. Arohi had a younger brother, Vihan, just 2 years younger. They were inseparable. Vihan was full of mischief, always running around, always laughing. But that one winter morning changed everything. They were playing by the riverside. The current was strong that day. One moment Vihan was laughing, and the next he slipped on a wet stone and was swept away. Arohi screamed until her voice broke. She ran home barefoot, blood on her knees, and collapsed before she could say what happened. When they found Vihan's body 2 days later, something in Arohi broke forever. She stopped speaking. No doctor could explain it. Her vocal cords were fine, but no words came out. Her voice had drowned with her brother. Rajiv, once a quiet man, turned violent. He blamed Arohi for not saving Vihan. He shouted at her, beat her sometimes when he was drunk, and called her cursed. Madhu tried to protect her, but she too was fading under the weight of sorrow and survival. Arohi's silence became a burden in the village. Children mocked her. Teachers gave up on her. She was the dumb girl. But there was one place where Arohi still felt alive, under the banyan tree behind their broken house. There, using charcoal from the stove and pieces of brick, she would sketch faces, eyes, the river, her brother, her nightmares, her dreams. She drew the words she could never speak. And somehow, those drawings became her language. One monsoon afternoon, a stranger visited the village. He was an NGO worker named Kabir, sent for a government education survey. He was young, kind-eyed, and noticed things others didn't. When he saw one of Arohi's drawings on a wall, an image of a little boy holding hands with a voiceless girl, he was stunned. "Who made this?" he asked. The villagers shrugged. "That mute girl, probably." Kabir found Arohi sitting under the banyan tree, sketching on a slate. He didn't speak. He just sat beside her. She looked at him, unsure. He pulled out a notepad and pencil from his bag and handed it to her. That moment changed everything. From that day, Arohi began drawing more than ever. Kabir visited her often, bringing books with pictures, magazines, pencils. He taught her the names of colors, shapes, artists. She learned without speaking. Kabir didn't try to make her talk. He let her art be her voice. He told Madhu, "Your daughter has magic in her hands. Don't waste it." But hope is fragile in poor homes. One evening, Rajiv came home drunk and found Arohi's sketches scattered across the floor. "What is all this?" he roared. "Will this paper feed us?" He burned her drawings in the stove. He burned her drawings in the stove. Arohi didn't cry. She just stood still, staring at the flames. That night, Kabir found her sitting outside his tent, holding a half-burned drawing. She had walked 2 miles alone. Kabir didn't ask questions. He made her tea, gave her a blanket, and let her stay the night. The next morning, he left for the city. But before going, he gave Arohi a small box of colored pencils and whispered, "Don't stop. Even when no one sees it, create." Years passed. Arohi grew into a quiet young woman. Her mother grew weaker, and Rajiv drank more. The village school stopped calling her. She spent her days helping her mother and her nights drawing by moonlight. But Kabir's words stayed inside her like a seed. At 18, after her mother passed away from untreated illness, and after another violent night with her father, Arohi did something no one expected. She left. She packed her sketchbook, the pencils, and 300 she had saved from years of selling wildflowers, and boarded a bus to Dehradun. The city was a storm compared to her village. No one noticed her silence. No one cared about her drawings. She slept near temples, begged for leftover food, and drew on scraps she found in trash bins. But she never stopped. One evening, outside a restaurant, she drew a portrait of a child using chalk on the footpath. People stopped. Someone gave her 20, then 50. A man asked for his wife's portrait. Slowly, people began to recognize her. A local artist named Sanjana noticed her work and offered her, "Sure, here's part 1 of your emotional and inspiration." He stood before her, years later, with tears in his eyes. "I told you," he said. "Your silence was never empty." Arohi didn't need to say anything. She simply took a brush, dipped it in color, and painted a small bird soaring into a sky on a nearby wall. Kabir watched, understanding. That was her way of saying, "I'm free now." Kabir offered her an opportunity to showcase her work in a small gallery in Delhi. Arohi had never imagined herself in a gallery. Her drawings were meant for cracked walls and broken stones, not frames and lights. But Kabir insisted, "People need to see this. You need to be seen." She agreed. Nervously, she traveled to Delhi with a bundle of her paintings. Images soaked in pain and silence, in colors that spoke louder than words. The gallery was small, but that night, it was filled with people. Strangers who stood silently before her paintings and cried. One painting showed a little girl sitting under a banyan tree with a box of burnt drawings beside her. Another showed a mother bending over a daughter, her back bent like a question mark. That night changed everything. People began asking about her. Who is this girl who paints like she's bleeding? Social media buzzed. Journalists came. Some wanted interviews, but Arohi didn't talk. Kabir would speak for her. He explained her story, always ending with the same line, "She doesn't need to speak. Her art is her voice." But Arohi wanted more than fame. She had seen what silence did to children like her. She knew hundreds of boys and girls who would never be heard, not because they couldn't speak, but because no one ever listened. So, with some help from Sanjana, Kabir, and a few donations, Arohi started a tiny studio on the edge of Delhi. She called it Canvas of Courage. At first, just 3 children came, one mute, one deaf, and one with cerebral palsy. They sat quietly, unsure, but Arohi knew how to reach them. She didn't use words. She sat beside them, painting circles, smiling, letting them explore. Within days, the walls of the studio were filled with bold, chaotic colors, not perfect, but full of soul. More children came, then volunteers, then teachers. Arohi's studio became a home for broken voices and lost dreams. They painted walls across Delhi, school buildings, flyovers, shelters, each mural telling a different story. Abuse, hope, poverty, strength. Arohi would lead with her brush, and others would follow. One mural, a massive one on the wall of a girl's orphanage, showed a tree made of open palms. Each leaf had the fingerprint of a girl who once felt invisible. That mural went viral again, picked up by national media. This time, not just Arohi, but her students were interviewed. "She taught us that we are not weak," said one of the girls. "We just speak in different ways." Awards came. Recognition. Money. Arohi was named one of India's most inspiring young women by a leading magazine. A film director even asked to make a documentary on her life. Arohi agreed on one condition: no dramatizing, no pity, no voiceovers, just truth. But success was never her goal. One winter, she returned to her village for the first time in years. The fields were drier, the houses older. The banyan tree was still there, quiet and faithful. She sat beneath it, remembering her brother Vihan. She pulled out a sketchbook and drew him, smiling, standing beside her. In the background, the river flowed. When she finished, she buried that drawing under the tree, like a letter to heaven. She visited her old house. Her father, Rajiv, had aged beyond his years. The anger in his eyes had faded into something softer. Regret, perhaps. When he saw her, he didn't shout. He didn't cry. He just sat quietly. Arohi sat too. She took out a pencil, placed it in his hand, and pointed to a piece of paper. He hesitated. Her work only got louder. She painted a massive mural on the outside of Delhi's railway station. An image of a girl holding a broken pencil, standing on top of a hill. The mural read, "Don't fix my voice. Hear my silence." It became iconic. International art schools began inviting her. Arohi traveled to Japan, France, and Kenya. In each place, she left behind a mural, a message, and a memory. But she always returned to her little studio in Delhi. That was home. When Arohi turned 30, she was awarded the National Padma Shri for her contribution to art and social service. On stage, in front of the President of India, she didn't speak. She simply held up a painting, a girl handing over her voice to a child, tears in his eyes. The audience gave her a standing ovation. That night, after the ceremony, she sat on her studio's rooftop, looking at the stars. Sanjana sat beside her. Kabir stood at the edge, smiling like a proud brother. Sanjana whispered, "Do you ever wish you could speak again?" Arohi thought for a while. Then she picked up her brush, dipped it in paint, and wrote on the wall beside them. "If I had spoken, would you have listened this deeply?" They sat in silence. The sky didn't say anything either, but it was beautiful. Empire, the Parth Mera story. Part 1. The Fall and the Fight. 1. The Humble Beginnings. In the narrow lanes of Ajmer, Rajasthan, beneath the peeling blue paint of a rented house, lived a boy with eyes full of dreams that far outgrew the boundaries of his neighborhood. His name was Parth Mera. He was the son of Vimla, a primary school teacher, and Shiv Mera, a humble tailor known for stitching school uniforms and wedding sherwanis. Despite the scarcity of money, their home was rich in warmth. Every evening, Shiv would sit cross-legged on his floor sewing machine, while Parth would lie on the floor sketching cars, machines, and sometimes logos for imaginary companies. One day, he'd whisper to himself, "This name will shine on the tallest building." Parth was an unusually observant child. He noticed how his father never complained even when working late into the night, or how his mother skipped meals when guests came over. It planted a quiet but fierce fire in his heart. He wanted to change their world. But life had other plans. Aspect 2. The Shattering Storm. At 16, Parth lost his father to a sudden heart attack. The shock was devastating. Shiv had been the pillar of the family, not just emotionally, but financially. Overnight, their lives turned upside down. Debts started knocking. Rent piled up. His mother began working double shifts at school, and Parth started tutoring younger kids to keep the house running. Dreams began to fade, replaced by responsibility. The sketchbooks were tucked away. Laughter disappeared. Parth was no longer a boy. He was the man of the house. And yet, something inside him refused to die. One night, while walking back from a tuition's job, he passed by a dusty electronics repair shop. He stared at an old, broken radio for several minutes, then stepped inside. The owner, a grumpy old man named Raghu, raised an eyebrow. "What do you want?" "I want to learn," Parth said. From that day forward, he began helping Raghu for free after his tuition sessions. In return, Raghu taught him the art of fixing, rebuilding, and salvaging dead machines. But more than that, Parth learned how businesses work: inventory, negotiation, margins, customer behavior. He observed everything, and a seed was planted. 3. College Dreams and Concrete Walls. Despite his struggles, Parth scored well in school and earned a partial scholarship to a small private college in Jaipur to study business administration. The remaining fees came from his mother's savings and Parth's tutoring income. College was an eye-opener. He met people like Kabir Verma, a loud, confident boy from Delhi, who became his best friend and business partner in dreams. Kabir had ideas. Parth had discipline. They were opposites who balanced each other perfectly. And then there was Rhea Kapoor, bright, brave, and born with a mind sharper than most. She wasn't impressed by wealth or style, but she noticed Parth. His silence, his pain, his fire. Slowly, quietly, love began to grow between the chaos. By second year, Parth and Kabir started a small venture, Reboot X, offering refurbished phones to college students at budget prices. It started as a side hustle. They bought damaged phones from the gray market, repaired them using skills Parth had learned from Raghu, and sold them with a basic warranty. They used social media to advertise and delivered via cycle or scooter. In 6 months, they had earned 80,000 in profit. They were flying high, until the fall came. 4. Betrayal in the boardroom. As Reboot X grew, Kabir began pushing for faster expansion. "Let's borrow money, Parth. Let's grow faster. We can't waste time being small." But Parth was cautious. "If we grow too fast without a system, it'll collapse. Let's reinvest profits and scale slowly." They clashed, and Kabir didn't wait. Without informing Parth, he met with an investor. A wealthy businessman with a reputation for swallowing startups whole. Devraj loved the idea, hated the founder. "That Parth, he's too moral, too slow. You and I, Kabir, can take this idea global." And in one signature, Parth was out. His shares were diluted, his name removed from the brand he had built. One morning, he received an email. "Your services are no longer required." Kabir had betrayed him, and Reboot X became Reboot Zen, now owned by Devraz's empire. Parth was shattered. He didn't speak for 3 days. He didn't cry. He just stared at the wall. It wasn't the money. It was the trust. It was the dream. Gone. From rock bottom to redemption, word spread. Some pitied him, others mocked. Even his professors suggested he should focus on studies and forget business. But Rhea didn't leave his side. One rainy evening, she sat beside him in the college library and said, "Do you know what makes coal turn into diamond? Pressure." That night, something inside Parth cracked open, and light poured through the wound. He took out his old sketchbook. On the last page, he wrote a new name, Revive. He was going to build again, from scratch. Only this time, it would be his. No shortcuts, no betrayal, no noise, just purpose. 6. The rise of Revive. Parth graduated and returned to Ajmer with nothing but ideas and a second-hand laptop. He borrowed $20,000 from a local NGO that funded small entrepreneurs and started Revive Devices from a rented 10x10 shop next to a chaiwala. This time, the business had a deeper mission: repair, recycle, and employ. He trained local youth to fix gadgets, especially school and college students. He offered free workshops on basic electronics and life skills. His first hire was Sanya Mehra, his younger sister who had just finished 12th. They built slowly. They offered home pickup and delivery, repair at doorstep services, even digital literacy classes for senior citizens. Every rupee was reinvested. Revive grew, not just as a business, but as a movement. By end of year 2, they had 4 centers across Rajasthan and a team of 28 young technicians, most of whom were from economically challenged backgrounds. Parth's name began appearing in local papers. He was invited to speak at colleges. An article titled "From Ashes to Action: Meet the Boy Who Was Betrayed But Built Back" went viral, and that's when Devraj Khanna noticed him again. 7. The second offer. Devraj called him. "I see you're doing well, Parth. Impressive. Let's talk business." Parth was hesitant but agreed to meet. Devraj offered to acquire Revive for 4 crores. "Join me as a VP. You'll have resources, power, and scale. Let's not fight. Let's merge brilliance." Parth looked him in the eye and said, "You taught me one thing, Mr. Khanna. Never trade your soul for speed." He rejected the offer. Word spread again. This time, he was hailed as the man who stood for values over valuation. But the war was far from over. Devraj launched a competitor company in Rajasthan, slashing prices, poaching staff, and spreading false reviews online. Revive suffered. They lost 2 centers. Finances dropped. Parth fell ill due to stress and exhaustion. Ria, now working in Mumbai, came back for a week and found him curled on the office floor. She cried that night, and Parth realized he couldn't do it alone anymore. 8. Rebuilding stronger. He hired a small but solid team: marketers, managers, legal advisors. He applied for government funding under a Startup India program. He met mentors, read voraciously, and adopted modern tech, inventory software, CRM, mobile app for services. They pivoted to also refurbishing laptops for schoolchildren, offering EMI plans for low-income families. Customers returned. And this time, Parth wasn't just rebuilding a business. He was building an ecosystem. By the 4th year, Revive became one of India's fastest-growing ethical refurbishing startups, receiving recognition from national media, tech conferences, and even the Prime Minister's startup cell. They had a team of 150 across 7 cities, but was focused. 1. The expansion and the echoes of pressure. Parth Mehra stood on the 15th floor of a newly opened Revive headquarters in Pune, staring out at the skyline. Just a few years ago, he was repairing phones in a 10x10 rented shop in Ajmer. Now, Revive had crossed 22 cities with over 350 employees and 4,000 plus certified repair agents trained through the Revive Futures program. His dream had surpassed boundaries, but so had the pressure. Each day brought a new challenge: investor meetings, partner negotiations, vendor bottlenecks, and media appearances. Every headline that praised him became a weight on his chest. Everyone wanted a piece of him: governments, brands, competitors, even his own board. Ria noticed it first. "You've built a revolution, Parth," she said softly one night as they lay in bed, her fingers tracing his scarred palm. "But don't lose yourself in it." He smiled, tired. "What if I am the revolution, Ria? What if it dies without me?" "No," she whispered. "You are the spark, but a real revolution must burn without needing the match." It was one of those nights that made Parth realize he was chasing growth, but maybe forgetting grace. 2. Marriage in a moment of stillness. Ria and Parth's wedding was simple, intimate, and held in the same school where his mother once taught. There were no celebrities, just community members, Revive employees, and orphanage kids they both supported. Kabir, surprisingly, showed up. They hadn't spoken since the betrayal, but Kabir walked in silently, handed Parth a note, and left. The note simply read, "You turned pain into purpose. I couldn't. I lost more than I gained. I hope someday you forgive me." Parth folded the letter and tucked it into his coat pocket. He didn't feel anger. He felt peace. With Ria by his side, he felt human again. She reminded him of the boy with the sketchbook and the dreams. Her presence kept him grounded when the world tried to place him on a pedestal. Their honeymoon wasn't in Europe or Bali. It was a road trip across India to meet the very people Revive had helped. Children using refurbished laptops, women who ran service centers, boys who became breadwinners after training with Revive. It wasn't a break. It was a blessing. 3. The crack in the mirror. 1 year later, Parth was in Bengaluru, attending a tech conclave where Revive was being awarded India's most impactful startup. He smiled for the cameras, shook hands, gave a brilliant speech. But behind the scenes, trouble brewed. Their AI-based device diagnostic tool, Revive IQ, had shown flaws. Devices marked 100% working were failing after delivery. Refund requests were flooding in. An internal audit revealed that one of the third-party logistics partners had been secretly replacing original parts with cheaper duplicates to increase margins. It was a massive blow. Social media exploded with hashtags like Revive Scam and Fake Repairs. News outlets ran stories. Investors grew nervous. Trust, a currency Parth had fought years to earn, was being wiped out overnight. Parth didn't sleep for 4 days. He held an emergency town hall with all employees. He didn't hide behind PR. He didn't blame the partner. He said, "This is our fault, my fault. We chose speed over scrutiny. I'll fix it myself if I have to." He then made the boldest decision yet. Temporarily suspend operations across the country to run a full internal check. Everyone warned him against it, but he knew. Sometimes you need to stop to go further. 4. Losing millions, gaining back trust. Revive lost over 11 crores in that quarter. Contracts were canceled. Many employees feared layoffs, but Parth refused to fire a single person. Instead, he cut his own salary to zero, as did the top leadership team. Ria liquidated her personal stocks to support employee welfare funds. And Parth went from city to city, personally addressing service teams, assuring vendors, and apologizing to customers. He also started a transparency initiative, Revive Reconnect, where customers could live track every step of the repair process, rate technicians, and even access the full component history of their device. It was revolutionary. It was honest. It was human. Within 4 months, Revive not only recovered, it came back stronger. Consumer trust surged. Old customers returned, this time with friends. And the same media that once questioned them now wrote stories titled, "How Revive Turned Crisis into Credibility." The Global Invitation. Later that year, Parth received a call from the World Ethical Tech Forum in Amsterdam. They invited him to speak about building conscious businesses in developing countries. Parth hesitated. He'd never been outside India. He didn't speak polished English. His success was built in dusty streets, not glass boardrooms. But Ria encouraged him. And so Parth stood on a global stage, wearing a simple khadi kurta, and told the story of a boy from Ajmer who once fixed radios to survive. The hall stood in ovation. Post-event, international interest flooded in. NGOs from Africa, education boards from Latin America, and green tech investors from Europe wanted to collaborate with Revive to replicate the model. It was no longer just a company. It was a movement. But success brings weight. More expansion meant more complexity. Parth started facing resistance from his own leadership team. Some wanted to automate training programs. Others wanted to cut rural centers in favor of profitable urban ones. The board began to push for IPO plans. Shareholders cared more about margins than mission. Parth began losing sleep again. He wasn't building anymore. He was battling spreadsheets, expectations, and internal politics. His health deteriorated. He missed meetings. He snapped at Ria. For the first time in years, he whispered to himself, "Maybe I'm not enough anymore." One evening, he went alone to his father's old sewing shop, now abandoned. He sat on the dusty floor, holding his father's rusted sewing needle. "I never asked for all this," he whispered to the silence. And then, a soft voice answered. It was Sonia, now leading Revive's HR team. "You didn't ask for it, Baya. You built it." Now decide, do you want to grow more or grow better? 7. The reinvention. That night, Parth drafted a bold internal memo titled, From Startup to Soul Up. He proposed decentralizing Revive. Instead of one giant company, he'd help turn every regional center into a self-owned micro-enterprise with full local control. The parent company would only provide training, branding, and quality audits. He reduced his CEO powers and appointed a council of local leaders. The board was stunned. Investors panicked. Some pulled out. But Parth was calm. This isn't about valuation, he told them. It's about values. The new model launched slowly, but found stunning success. Empowered local leaders felt ownership. Innovation flourished. Women-led centers in Jharkhand and Assam started outperforming urban outlets. Revive became a network of hearts, not just branches. The full circle. On Revive's 10th anniversary, Parth returned to the government school where his mother had taught. He donated 500 refurbished tablets to the students and launched a memorial scholarship in her name. Standing before those children, he saw himself. Hungry, uncertain, but hopeful. He spoke to them in Hindi. No script, no glamour. Dreams are not what you see at night. They are what keep you awake. I lost a lot, but I gained something deeper. Every fall taught me how to rise. Every betrayal gave me a lesson. And every repair I did taught me how to fix not just machines, but broken lives. The entire school stood and clapped. Some cried. Among them stood a boy with torn shoes, holding a tablet tighter than his breath. Parth walked up to him. "What will you become?" he asked. The boy replied, "You." Parth smiled, not proud, just peaceful. A life in the shadows. Samarth Raichand was born not with a silver spoon, but in the shadow of one. He grew up in Silvassa, a small Union Territory town surrounded by industries, mountains, and silence. His father, Aditya Raichand, was once a thriving industrialist, owner of Raichand Textiles, a factory that employed hundreds and gave Silvassa its heartbeat. But a decade before Samarth's birth, a fire destroyed the entire plant, killing 23 workers and crippling the business forever. The tragedy haunted Aditya. He never recovered, financially or mentally. He became a shell, a quiet man with eyes lost in regret, spending his days watering plants and avoiding the world. His wife, Meera, stitched clothes at home to run the household, while young Samarth watched his family survive, not live. By the age of 10, Samarth understood silence. He knew what unpaid electricity bills looked like. He knew what shame tasted like, especially when people called his father a murderer for the factory incident. But he never stopped dreaming. He kept a journal hidden under his bed. In it were doodles, lists of ideas, random product sketches, and one line repeated every few pages. "I'll rebuild everything. I'll redeem his name." Chapter 2. Seeds of Fire. By 16, Samarth had started selling handmade bookmarks, t-shirts, and small art pieces online through a basic Shopify store. He called it Ink Soul, a name that came to him one night while watching raindrops slide down his cracked window pane. His art was raw, introspective, dark, and full of emotion, and it resonated. Slowly, orders came in. Teenagers who felt misunderstood, artists who battled depression, and loners from cities far away wrote to him, "Your designs speak what I feel but cannot say." In just a year, Ink Soul had 30,000 Instagram followers, but his parents didn't understand it. His father once asked, "Is this what you want to do in life? Draw pain?" Samarth replied softly, "I want to turn pain into something that heals." 3. The collapse. At 18, right after school, Samarth was offered an art scholarship in Pune. It was the break he needed. But 2 days before leaving, tragedy struck. His father was found unconscious in the backyard. Diagnosis: late-stage pancreatic cancer. Doctors gave him 6 months at most. Samarth's world shattered. He tore the college acceptance letter that night and chose to stay back, caring for his father full-time. He sold his laptop, camera, and art inventory to afford medicines. Ink Soul stopped. The Instagram page went cold. Every night, as his father lay in bed, Samarth would read aloud the old factory files, loan documents, inspection reports, court papers. He wanted to understand what happened that night, why the fire occurred, why insurance claims were denied, why people hated his father. What he found broke him. His father was innocent. A corrupted boiler vendor had bypassed safety protocols. Aditya had reported it, but his warnings were ignored by the agency. When the boiler exploded, the blame conveniently fell on him. Aditya knew the truth, but didn't fight it. He believed the weight of 23 lives couldn't be washed off, guilty or not. Samarth held his father's hand one night and said, "I'll rebuild the factory, but this time, not with machines, with meaning." His father wept, for the first time in years. 3 weeks later, Aditya passed away in his sleep. Samarth's grief was quiet, but his fire was loud. 4. The Fall and the Rise. With 17,000 in savings and no college degree, Samarth reopened Ink Soul from a rented one-room flat in Surat. He didn't just design now, he wrote. Each product came with a handwritten letter telling the story behind the art. He created categories like Wear Your Wounds, t-shirts with abstract art for mental health awareness, unheard poems, journals with verses for people battling anxiety, the Fallen Collection, pieces inspired by grief, memory, and healing. Word spread like wildfire. He didn't market the brand, people did. Influencers wore his t-shirts not because he paid them, but because they felt seen. Within a year, Ink Soul crossed 28 lakhs in revenue with 0 ads. But Samarth didn't celebrate. He hired 2 employees from Silvassa, children of factory workers who had died in the fire. He wasn't building a brand, he was building atonement. Shot 5. The Temptation. Success attracts temptation. A Bengaluru VC firm reached out. They loved the brand, the narrative, the virality. They offered 2 crore for 40% equity and full marketing control. Their plan: scale fast, dilute the grief stuff, make it cool and universal. The world doesn't want sadness. They want aesthetics. Samarth thought long and hard. He met them in a cafe, looked them in the eyes, and said, Inksole isn't about selling shirts. It's about speaking for people who've never had a voice. If we remove the story, we remove the soul. He walked away. 2 weeks later, that firm launched a knockoff brand called Grey Veil. Same designs, better marketing, fake influencers. They even hired ex-Inksole interns. Sales dropped. People got confused. Comments online read, "Is Inksole gone?" 6. A voice from the void. Samarth spiraled into depression. He stopped drawing, stopped speaking to his team. The betrayal, the copycat, the collapse. It hit harder than failure. Then, one night, a message landed in his inbox. "My son died by suicide last year. I found your t-shirt in his drawer. He had underlined one line you wrote on the back tag. Your survival is art. That line is now tattooed on my wrist. You saved me. Thank you." He stared at the message all night. That single sentence rebuilt him more than any investor could. He reopened the studio the next morning and told his team, they can copy art, but not pain, and certainly not healing. 7. The rebirth. Inksole rebranded quietly. No PR, no announcements, just raw art. He launched a new collection titled Redemption Fabric, where each piece was stitched by survivors of factory fires across India. He collaborated with NGOs to find women and men who had lost limbs, skin, or family in industrial accidents. Each garment carried a tag with their story. Inksole wasn't just fashion, it became a testimony. Every rupee of profit from that collection went to building the Raichan Foundation, a trust for industrial disaster victims. Sales tripled, but more importantly, the mission exploded. 8. A new factory, a new flame. On the 10th death anniversary of his father, Samarth inaugurated the new Raichan Soul Center in Silvassa. It wasn't a textile plant, it was a creative therapy factory. It had art rooms, printing machines, podcast booths, story recording stations, and a quiet library. People came to heal, to work, to feel heard. Samarth stood before the crowd and said, "My father's factory burned, so did our pride. But from those ashes, we built something that doesn't make products. It makes peace." His voice cracked.